All right, folks. I'm going to talk about hacking the city. And this has nothing to do with breaking in and you know, ransomware or anything of that nature. I'm going to try this clicker thing. There we go. The origin of this talk, last summer, I gave a talk for the Urban Land Institute, and it was called Land Use. There's an app for that. And I believe that folks who are doing development work and building new things around the city probably aren't the folks that are doing heavy-duty investigation of technology and how it can affect your life. So the point of that talk was to kind of say, hey, how can land use be affected by these new technologies that come along? And as I continue to collect articles about that and do a deeper dive, that's what brought me to this discussion where I wanted to talk about, you know, some primary technologies that I think are, you heard a lot about them in 2017, and how those might affect land use and also urban planning. You know, not just what kind of building you build, but where you build it, and can you build it next to this and that sort of thing, or why should you build it, and things of that nature. So that's where this talk kind of got started. I'm going to talk about three things today. Online retail, which probably you know something about, autonomous vehicles, which we'll talk about, and artificial intelligence, which is a big, vague thing over there, but we'll talk about that a little bit too. So, one of the things that'll happen is this weekend I'm going to be tweeting my brains out with all of the source material that I used to put this talk together. And if you want to, you can go to Twitter on Monday and check the hashtag hacking the city, and you'll be able to find links to all of the info that I used. I have about 150 articles that I've collected. So there's lots and lots of info, background. If I had, you know, obviously I'm going to try and be out of here in like 25 minutes, so I hope there's much more information out there than what I'm going to talk about today. Let's talk about online retail. The so-called retail apocalypse has become so ingrained in the US that it now has the distinction of its own Wikipedia entry. That's a quote about retail apocalypse. Did you guys hear about retail apocalypse a little bit last year? Yeah. Maybe a little bit? Let's talk about online retail. Is there anybody in here who has never bought anything online? You have to ask, because, you know, there's always somebody in a crowd, right? But do you know when online retail got started? You have any clue? Give me a guess. Somebody give me a year.
1998.
98. 94. 2000s. Anybody want to go further back in time?
1970.
That's close. And you find all these entries, and everybody claims they invented online retail. There's a guy in England who claims that he started online retail in like 1979. eBay and Amazon, 95. But there were things like CompuServe and these other little odd things in the mid-'80s who say they invented online retail. But it's been around for a little bit, so we know some things about it. In terms of online retail, this past Christmas, $115 billion worth of revenue. That was roughly about 13.5% of all the money that was spent in the quarter. That's a pretty big amount. Online retail grows year over year. Last year the growth was 16%. A lot of people would like to have 16% growth. In-store retail grew 2.5%. It's not that 84% of people that are buying in a store are outnumbered by the 13% that are buying online. It's the growth that people are after in terms of online retail. What you've got, though, is people look at online retail and they say, oh my God, this stuff is really, really growing. Let's pay attention to it. And as a result of that, a lot of people want to blame the so-called retail apocalypse. Have you heard the term? You know, if we were at a college, one side would go retail and the other would say apocalypse, and we go back and forth until our team won. This retail apocalypse thing. Last year there were almost 4,000 store closings announced. 4,000 store closings. Between 2013 and now, the cumulative total of store closings is 20,000 stores. Now, there are stores opening at the same time, so there's a net number there you have to work with. Before 2023, the estimate is that 50% of all the malls in America will be closed. If you're in retail, does this sound like fun? If you own a mall, does it sound like fun? There are certain people that own malls and their malls are doing okay, but there are other malls that aren't doing quite as well. One of the things is this notion that online retail has caused everybody to leave the stores. We don't want to go shopping anymore. That's not true. Online retail does contribute to people not going to stores. But there are other factors involved. Consumers don't want to do shopping like they used to. There's an oversupply of retail. I got to use the term overmauled last year. Have you ever said overmauled? Go home, find your mom, call her up, say, hey, Mom, overmauled, and see what she thinks of you, okay? Try it out, see how it works for you. Some of these stores that are closing just have bad management. They took on tons of debt, and they got to a place where they can't keep going forward. I'm not looking at you directly, Sears or Kmart, but as if JCPenney were any better, you know, or Macy's, or any of those stores that you hear about doing lots of closings. You've got to be able to navigate the rough waters as well as the smooth ones. So, what's the effect of online retail and this apocalypse thing that's going on? Well, in essence, there's a reduced need for retail space. There, you know, this is not Eastland Mall, but it could have been, right? Go to a big box store anymore. Anybody go to remember Circuit City? It was huge. It was there. You went there all the time. I have no reason why, but you went there, right? Remember big box bookstores? At South Park, there used to be Borders, and it was right across the street from Barnes & Noble. It was like paradise for book people. Not so much. All right? Toy stores. Have any of you ever gone to a Toys R Us? Yeah? Have you bought anything there? Okay. But the idea of going to a store that is 100,000 square feet of toys is not necessarily as appealing anymore because my son is here today. This is fun because, you know, school's out. But I don't know if I've ever bought him anything at Toys R Us. I think we've gone in a couple of times, but hey, Amazon, right? Those old ways of going shopping just aren't cutting it anymore. There are new kinds of ways that people go shopping, and I'm going to talk about Fabletics a couple of times because Fabletics is one of those companies to me that kind of exemplifies how to make retail in this day and age. They had 1 million people that were members of Fabletics before they had any stores. They were pulling down almost $250 million in revenue before they had any stores. That's not bad, okay? And we'll talk a little more about that shortly. One of the things, again, less demand for actual retail stores. Another thing, and this will affect our cities, let's talk about how we used to do things. There'd be a producer out there, they'd make some stuff, right? And once you make stuff, what do you do with it?
Ship it.
No, you put it in a warehouse, right? And then you ship it. And where did you ship it to? A store, right? And then people would go to the store and buy your stuff and drive it home. So all of the infrastructure, our roads were cool. You know, we have interstates, so you can drive a big old truck down to South Park and you can dump your stuff out. And then the people drive the goods back to their house. All right, it was Christmas. Anybody have porch pirates in their neighborhood at Christmas time? Porch pirates, the people that steal your Amazon package? You hear about this all the time. Because now the model is, I'm a producer, I make some stuff, I may put it in a warehouse somewhere, but it gets shipped not to a store in a big old truck, it gets shipped to your house. That last mile of distribution now falls on FedEx and UPS and the US Postal Service. And what does that do to our streets and our neighborhoods now? Because were the streets in your neighborhood built to have 100 FedEx trucks roll down them every day? And believe it or not, there are actually places where the answer to that question is no. And some of those are in Charlotte. So we have to look at what's changing with that whole distribution model. It's great, I got free shipping, but what does free shipping really mean to your city? Here's one. We got rid of South End. It was a wonderful warehouse space, and we put in lots of apartments, and everybody's all happy about that, right? Because it's cool, you're the light rail, you can get downtown, there's bars, there are those bikes everywhere, right? I hear a subtle laughter that might indicate you have an opinion about the bikes, but we'll go on. In 2009, Amazon had 9 million square feet of warehouse space that they used. Anybody want to make a guess at how much warehouse space they used last year? Come on, throw a number out.
10x.
Bigger. Last year, Amazon closed out the year with 114 million square feet of warehouse space. And they're not the only people that are doing it. So what does your city become? Do you make a better city by putting a bunch of warehouse space on a transportation thoroughfare somewhere? Maybe. Maybe not. If you have old warehouse space that's not used in your city, do you then decide, hey, maybe we should sell our city as a warehouse place? These are things that may change the way that our cities look. And this quote is unknown because I saw it doing my research and I couldn't go back and find the quote, but I loved it. Shopping needs to be more than just going to a store and looking at the inventory. And what the online retail technology has done for us is we don't need to just go to a store and look at the inventory. The word showrooming entered the vocabulary about 10 years ago, right? Because everybody went to Circuit City and they looked at the washer and dryer and they went home and they ordered it on Amazon. And people do that with a lot of stuff, okay? So it's not just about looking at the inventory. Things have changed. People are trying new stuff. This is Nordstrom's local. It's 3,000 square feet. Nordstrom's at the mall, if it was a traditional Nordstrom's, would be 140,000 square feet. Not even comparable. This Nordstrom's has no stock. You can't go in and just buy the dress or pants that you want at that moment. You can get some tea and they'll do your nails or whatever, but they'll personally measure you and make sure you get exactly what you want and they'll deliver it to your house. Okay? 3,000 square feet versus, it costs a lot of money to heat 140,000 square feet. And you got to have all those employees. And this one, I saw the number and I can't remember, but I think they said they had 8 employees. They probably have more than 8 people at the Nordstrom's at the mall. Pretty sure. Stores have begun to be about branding as opposed to just selling you stuff. One of the stores that does this perhaps better than anybody is the Apple store. When you go to an Apple store, if you actually go to the one in South Park and you look around, you say to yourself, there's more empty space in this store than there is product space. That's simply how it works. Apple is doing their town squares, town hall kind of thing where they want people just to gather in their larger stores now, hang out, have some coffee. It's just a place to be. It's a park with a roof on it and an Apple logo. Simple as that. It is about branding. And Apple's doing well. Apple makes $5,500 a square foot in their stores. The average American store makes, anybody want to make a guess? Besides less. About $300 a square foot. Okay? So let's say, if it's successful, people will copy it. Just pointing this out. People are doing retail in a very, very different way now. This one's one that I'm interested to see where this goes. Would you go to a grocery store where there were no checkout lanes? Yeah? Would you go to a grocery store that could figure out what you had put in your bag without you having to tell it? Amazon Go opened a little over a year ago in Seattle. The notion was they're going to put about 2,000 of these stores all over the country. They're 1,800 square foot stores. They have perishable items in it, so you can go get some milk and some bread, whatever gum, whatever other things you need when you need to go to the store and get something in a hurry. But there are no checkout lines. There's very little personnel except to handle the inventory. The store itself has sensors that figure out what you're doing, what you put in your bag, and when you go out, it charges your account. Simple as that. Now, Amazon is the cutting edge of online technology, and Walmart's doing the same thing. And do we think of Walmart as the cutting edge of technology? Not necessarily. And the Walmart stores are just getting started, but the whole notion that how can you lower the friction between getting a product into your store and getting it into the customer's hands and getting payment from that? There are 3.5 million people working at checkout registers at Walmarts around the world. They're all quaking in their boots at home tonight. Maybe not. But something to think about. Will that be different? Again, I'll come back to Fabletics here. If you're a member at Fabletics, you go in the store, they already know your preferences. They know what you like, and they may have stocked the store in anticipation that you might come into their store. They use their analytics like you wouldn't believe. So these are things to think about. Stores themselves and malls, we've got less demand for retail. We've got people trying out new ideas. What I call that in the end is people have begun to curate shopping. And Park Road Shopping Center to me is an excellent example of a curated shopping space, because you go there now, they've got all of these different restaurants that keep the retail life open for a longer period of time. They've changed the mix of stores a little bit. It used to be easy. If you were a developer, you simply went to the subdivision that you were next to. You put in a grocery store, a drugstore, dry cleaner, and the little Vietnamese ladies doing nails. And you were pretty much set. It's a little bit more difficult to build an active center where people will go and stay, but it's more profitable than building a convenient center where it's just close to people and doesn't necessarily offer them what they would like. So these are things to think about. That's online retail. Let's talk about autonomous vehicles. I like autonomous vehicles. There are plenty of different ways. Do you guys know what an autonomous vehicle is? Was anybody driven here today in their self-driving car? You have to check. It's just like people not making purchases online. You never can tell. So who wants to have a car that's self-driving? Anybody? Why? I ask this question legitimately because I never get an answer that I like.
Well, fine.
This is the way I define autonomous vehicles. It is an unmanned thing that is capable of sensing the environment and then navigating it. So that leaves me open to lots of different stuff. I mean, we all know about cars. We see them, you know, since the 30s. There's that little cute picture of the 4 people riding. They're like playing Scrabble going to grandma's house, right? I think it's in that song about over the river and through the woods or something. There are autonomous trucks, which I love as a concept and I think will be incredibly transformative. There are boats, which are very interesting. Buses. There was a bus crash, an autonomous bus crash in Vegas like a couple of weeks ago, and I was just excited because it had just been in service for like 2 hours. Yeah, odd sense of humor. There is farm equipment, and we'll hit that really shortly. There's military equipment, which is kind of scary. And then there are planes. I have a friend who's a pilot, and I asked her, I said, well, how much do you actually fly the plane? And she explained to me that they had to get to 5,000 feet, and then she would flip on the autopilot. And I said, well, when do you turn it off? And she said, well, usually about 20 seconds before I land. And then she says, but sometimes I forget. And so she's like, well, the plane lands on autopilot. It just lands on autopilot. It's the way it is, right? And you didn't know this. You've been flying all over the country, had no clue that, you know, you were on autopilot. Bob Galland, who has his own investment research company, says that he believes there are going to be 10 million self-driving cars on the road in 2020. Note what our year is now. And that by 2030, a quarter of the vehicles on the road would be autonomous. 2020 is how many years away? Okay, you guys are failing on the math so bad. How many cars is 10 million cars? Is it a lot? Is it a little bit? Is it not even significant? Do you have any earthly idea how many cars there are in America? 500 million? No?
350.
There's 250 million cars in America. There are 1.4 billion cars in the world, give or take a little bit, and depending on how you define what a car is, or vehicle, excuse me. So is 10 million really a lot? Waymo was excited last year because they drove 4 million miles in one of their self-driving cars. And I looked, and the number was like 3.5 trillion miles for US driving for the whole year. So millions has only 2 commas, and trillions has 4 commas. So if you were impressed by their 4 million miles, that's fine. It was an impressive 4 million. We all got to start somewhere, right? So these are things to think about. These vehicles, let's see, the benefits that we get from these vehicles in theory are that they reduce the number of crashes. That's what everybody says. We're going to have less car crashes because I was talking to a bicyclist friend of mine. She's like, it'll be great because they won't hit me. There's a catch to that. In theory, there's better traffic flow because these things they know where they are. They can talk to one another. They'll get closer and brake faster and do more things. If you are disabled, if you're elderly, if you are a kid, you now have an increased availability to mobility options. And then if you have been fallen under the spell of Mercedes-Benz, you just love this car because it looks great, doesn't it? It's like, wow, that was just a regular car. And I don't know that it's ever done anything besides just sit there and be photographed. But that's impressive. Now, technically, we can do self-driving cars. We can make cars that don't hit stuff, that stay in their lane, all that sort of stuff. There's a scale from level 1 to level 5 the government has, and level 1 is like, the car has automatic lights that come on, and level 5 is, it drives you around and you never have to touch a thing. But the technical issues aren't the problem. Here are some of the roadblocks, and a lot of these involve how your city will react to these roadblocks, because different cities are going to do this in different ways. And it's in my notes here, and I'll just go ahead and mention it. In North Carolina, in 2015 and in 2016, the legislature put up a resolution to tell the DMV to study autonomous vehicles. It failed both times. And my question is, what's up with that? Is it like if we ignore it long enough, it just won't happen? But I look, there are 14 states that actually have legislation that say this is what an autonomous vehicle is, kind of define it. There are 15 states that have voted on it and said, no, we're not dealing with this. And the rest are either considering it or doing absolutely nothing at all. So I don't know. The question is, how do you define it legally? There are things, is a bicycle a vehicle? It is under North Carolina law, but is that something we define as a car? A lot of people don't normally think of those things as being on the road. If you're a passenger being self-driven around somewhere, do you have any responsibility while you're in that? What do your lawmakers say about this right now? Do you have to get these things licensed to get in them? Should they go everywhere? I mean, you can't drive a farm tractor on the interstate. Should you be able to drive should a self-driving vehicle be able to go everywhere that any other car can go? These are questions that haven't even begun to be asked in a lot of places. And those are the things that are going to stop self-driving cars more so than, can it stop when a ball goes out in front of it. We've got law enforcement. And I'm pretty sure on this, and I forgot to call my cop friend, but how does a police officer stop a self-driving car with an expired tag? I don't know, but it's something to think about. If they can't do it then, what else is going to happen, that they need to stop those vehicles for? The Department of Transportation. People have been making roads the same way for a long time. We got some asphalt. We got some earth movers. We're going to make it flat. We're going to put some asphalt on. It's going to be great, right? That's all there is to it. I'm sure everybody that lives north of town and goes up and down 77 is absolutely, they know that it's just those things. The question is, does your car talk to the road? Does the road talk to your car? Does DOT anywhere know how to do these things? Okay? Those road markings, a lot of the cars are based on this notion that they stay in the lines between the road markings. It has been years since I've been even vaguely satisfied with the road markings at night. I'm sorry. Sometime in the 1950s, they stopped making quality road markings. And if it's raining, God, you can't see a damn thing, right?
Like the streets down here either.
Yeah, it's challenging. But if you've got a car that navigates on road markings, and you're in a state where the road markings are substandard, what happens with that? You know, these are things, should there be a standard way to mark roads? Do we need new intersections? When these cars are all navigating one of the things that freaks self-driving cars out, have any of you been over the intersection of Park Avenue and Camden, right near Price's Chicken Coop? It's a four-way stop, right? If you've ever gone to that stop and the four people have pulled up at the same time, I'm going to do the thing that will freak out every self-driving car. And someone at that four-way stop is going to do it. No clue that that happened. Self-driving car, no clue. All right? So those are the things. The human intuition pieces really screw with these cars. So do we need to make new intersections? Would that intersection be better if it was a roundabout? And then how much money is it going to cost us to convert all these four ways to roundabouts? Stuff, right? How do you mix autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, with cars that aren't self-driving? Okay? Because somebody's going to be doing that. And the whole thing's going to be a mess at a certain point. One of the things I think is very interesting, would you get into an ad-supported car? I'm just saying, if your car drives you by Dunkin' Donuts every day for breakfast, and you didn't say go by the Dunkin' Donuts, but it'll find one and drive you past it. Is this a good thing? I'm just saying, Google is still a search engine company, despite the museum app and all those other things that they want you to believe are great things. They make their money off of putting ads in front of you. So that taxi with the lower priced ride may be showing you things that advertisers are paying for. Is that good? Should you know it ahead of, should it be disclosed? These are things to wonder about. Here's that moral question. Insurance people are going to be the people that stop this. You're in the car. The car is headed toward 4 people and they're going to be killed unless the car decides to go down this other road where it's going to kill the one baby, right? And how does the car decide that? Will Mercedes make that decision different than Hyundai? And if they do, will you pay more for the Mercedes or will you pay more for the Hyundai? And whose responsibility is it? Are they going to come and get the software people if something goes wrong? You know, and none of those things are being decided. Everybody's kind of sitting back like, oh, the cars aren't here yet. Yeah. One of the ones I love, I saw the article on Curbed yesterday, and this happened a couple of weeks ago, but in the Mission in San Francisco, somebody attacked a self-driving car that had stopped. It was, I can't remember, it might have been an Uber car that had stopped at a traffic light and it was waiting for the pedestrian to go by, and they basically ran into it themselves and dented the back of the car. Why? I don't know, but how does your car react in a situation like that? My thought, as I hear stuff like that, it goes really down, you know, this, I may be an extreme person with a criminal personality, but you've got a buddy, and your buddy walks out in front of the self-driving car and it stops. Your buddy comes up and robs the people in the car while it stopped because it won't go because you're standing in front of it. How does that play out in terms of crime in your city? Will self-driving cars be accompanied by a large wave of crime? I just ask questions. I don't have the answers. But remember in 2012, after these newfangled iPhone things were introduced, in 2012, 40% of all larcenies in New York City involved a product built by Apple. Okay? Because new technology gives us new crime opportunities. It's great. You know, people think ride sharing is a fun thing. I'm not so sure about that. But will ride sharing actually benefit us if there's self-driving cars? A lot of people think that ride sharing will result in a lot more traffic on the road because those ride sharing cars have to get back to a place. And so they're going to generate trips. After they've dropped you off, they've got to go to some place. My brother-in-law lives outside of a town called Eindhoven in the Netherlands. There's a company there that has these cars that during the day you can drive them yourselves and they end up all over the city. In the evening, they drive themselves back to their home base. They only do it at night, but is that the right way to tackle this adventure? These are things to think about. And how will that, again, has DOT thought about this? Has the city council thought about this? These are things that are policy issues, and some of them are physical development issues that need to be addressed. All right. One of the autonomous technologies that I think is going to be truly transformative involves trucks and shipping. And what happened in April of 2016 is a bunch of trucks took off from 6 different countries in Europe, and they all drove to the port of Rotterdam. The trucks were all platoons where there was one person in the front controlling all of the vehicles driving. They all communicated, so they all drove kind of together. Oh my, this is going to be great, because now you can drive a lot more stuff with a lot fewer people all over the place. And the efficiency gains, I think, are going to be spectacular in terms of, in America, we have a shortage of truck drivers. So this is going to be great, because now we can move more stuff with fewer drivers. The trucks drive close together in a platoon. This allows them to be a little bit more fuel efficient. It lowers their crash rates in theory, okay? Trucks have the same roadblocks as cars. There's going to be an insurance company out there that's just going to have a cow. You're going to drive how many trailers? But if those things can be worked out, I believe this can truly be transformative. Now we got the flip side of it. You know, yes, we can move all this stuff, but how do you get this into the food line over at Park Road? All right, because you can just get one trailer in there now. You're telling me you're going to bring all 6 of these trailers or 3 of these trailers in there at once? How are we going to make that work? People are going to have to rethink some of how they do their development to make that more appropriate. Yeah. All right, a couple of other autonomous things I'm going to hit real quickly. This is farmland. Think about Roomba for farms, okay? Because what happens is, it's a much simpler problem. Generally, there are no roads on farms. So you can just set your little farm vehicle in one of these little squares, and it can go do its thing all day, whatever it is that farm vehicles do. But John Deere thinks that that's a good idea. You know, they would. And so, again, it is that whole notion of Roomba for farms. You could do your harvesting or your planting or whatever, and it would be great. This is a self-driving boat. It is a Norwegian project, and if this project works as good as they think it will replace 40,000 trips by truck a year. 40,000 trips by a truck a year. This vehicle is going to be used to ship stuff about 37 miles down a fjord. You know, from one place to the port of Larvik. That's my Norwegian, sorry, go with it. I think that these could be very useful here in America. 2% of freight in America travels between states by boat. Did you hear that number? 2%. That's not a big number. I'm just saying oranges could float from Florida to New England and use almost no gas, right? There's this thing called the Jones Act, which apparently is a 100-year-old law that basically is put in place to discourage interstate transport by ship. That wasn't its original intent, but that's how it's working out. It's cheaper to fly cows from Hawaii to the mainland than it is to put them on a boat. That's the perspective. If that changes to a model similar to what the Europeans have, the Europeans ship about 40% of their freight by sea vessel. If we were to change to that model, a great amount of advancement could be made there. So those are some autonomous things. And I think that they will have a tremendous impact on our city. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. You know, there were some headlines last year. Elon Musk, Iron Man, our very own, is spending $1 billion to stop the AI apocalypse. He's doing this with some other people. You know, anybody that said, oh my God, AI is going to take over, it's going to kill us all. They've made movies about it. It's a wonderful thing. Maybe not. What's an AI? Anybody have a definition of what AI is? You guys got a clue on that one? Yeah? No? I define AIs as an agent, and that's a software hardware thing, right? That figures out its environment, where it is, and then it can take steps to make sure that it maximizes its chances of reaching a goal. It's goal-oriented. It needs to learn something or do something, but it can help itself do those things. Artificial general intelligence is this big thing. Oh God, you just talk to it, it does whatever. It's like another person, it's just not real, right? That's not necessarily what's needed. We need more narrow AIs, and those, I believe, could have a significant impact on the planning department in your city, the urban designers that are around you, by helping design the landscapes, the urban landscape, by facilitating the process of developing in that landscape and analyzing what's happened in that landscape. So let's take a look at some stuff here. Does anybody recognize any of these people, what TV show they've been on? No? The Genius Show? This guy looks like somebody I know a whole lot, and it's weird. None of these people are real. These were all generated by an AI. Okay? But they kind of, maybe it looks kind of like Jennifer Aniston's haircut in 1996, or something like that, right? It's that guy. So, these aren't bad, right? They're better than a cartoon stick figure drawing. And an AI did it. You think an AI could sit around and maybe make a city? And make how the city interacts with itself? The thing about it is AIs can be taught everything about a particular subject, or we can build AIs that learn everything about a particular subject. If you build an AI that learns about a particular subject, there are cities around. We could feed it a great deal of information about cities. We know this now. And in the end, it can say, this is a great place to put a bike path. People cross this street here, not there. Those are the things that I think will imagine how developers go about making use of the land that's around, and urban planners saying, well, this is going to be a new town center, or something of that nature. The question becomes, who will be the person in charge of this AI? Will it be your local government? Or what if it's a local developer that becomes the person that can do this? What's the dynamic there? Or what if it's a third-party company that can do this for both? What's the dynamic there? Things to consider. When you talk to developers, they will almost always tell you, you know what, the process of getting something done down at the county is incredibly slow, it's awful, it takes too much time. If it was only faster and less regulation, life would be good. That can happen. A friend of mine who's a city planner for another city here on the East Coast somewhere, I gave her a call, and during her career, she worked at a town that was growing very, very rapidly. In order to handle the volume of development work that they had, they simply got rid of paper. If you were going to send something to the city to be developed, you had to send it in a certain electronic format. That format allowed them to pre-flight all of the plans so that they could find the errors in the plan early. Oh, this setback is not enough. This building is too near this thing. This zoning regulation is violated here. If you go to the Charlotte Planning Department website and you go to rezoning.org and you look at the rezoning application, you will see a scanned-in copy of a paper application. Is that the place for us to be? I think that there's some places, if you had a little chat bot, not like Tay that learns to do racist things, but a regular chat bot that could talk to you about real estate development work, would it be useful to the community? And I think it would be incredibly useful to the community. What you want to do is reduce that regulatory friction that people will run into when they're trying to develop things in your community, and that's good for everybody. And there's a lot of information about cities out there. And how do we analyze that to say, have we done a good job or have we done a craptastic job in developing a part of our city. Now, this is a map of Charlotte. From this map, I can tell you where the backyard trails is. Anybody in here ride bikes? Know the backyard trails? Anybody know the short track over at Renaissance Park? Anybody know the booty loop? Right? Here's the booty loop. Here's the backyard trails. There's the short track. This data all came from Strava. And it shows you where people ride their bikes in Charlotte. All right? How many of you have been more than 2 feet away from your phone this morning? Or this afternoon, whatever time. Right? Your phone's near you all the time. Does your phone company know where your phone is? Oh, hell yeah. Right? So, by proxy, your phone company kind of knows a lot of stuff. They don't sell it at this moment, kind of. But they could, and there's a lot of value in that, because if you know how many phones are coming in on South Boulevard in the morning, and you're here in Charlotte, that tells you something, doesn't it? And it's not just the phone companies, it's not just Strava. You can look at, how many of you have ever done the archival feature on Google Earth? So you look at an area and you can see, like 10 years ago, oh, this was a hood, now it's not, right? What happens when you teach an AI to analyze those photos and it says, oh, this neighborhood declined and here's some of the things that happened to cause that neighborhood to decline? What happens if a private company has that information and technology versus your local government? And you know, government should always do everything because they're good at it. Oh, I'm lying, I'm sorry. You know, but the question becomes, who do you want to make those choices? Is it a regulatory agency near you or not? Those are some of the things about urban planning. Now, I will get to closing with a quote. Yes? No, Strava is not just bikes, because if you look up here, I could have clicked on the running people, and I'm assuming this is the swimming people, and these are the boaty people. I may be wrong, but yeah, I didn't click on all because the bike one was so clear. You know, you could pick out some landmarks I thought people might know. You look at the running one, if you live in a neighborhood where you, there's a running path that you know everybody takes, those pop out. It didn't pop out in my neighborhood, and since this is all about me, I didn't care about your neighborhood. More or less. That's the way it is. But I mean, again, with Strava, there's just so much information that's available out there. And they're not the only people that are keeping that information. Again, your phones. Who's got an Apple Watch in here? Yeah, you're being tracked. Right? Your watch, somebody know, if you got the last series, whatever, 3 watch, yeah, with the cellular, yeah, we know where you are. Simple as that. As again, Flavor Flav is one of the finest technologists that this country has ever produced. I hear laughter, as perhaps there are people who think that's not the case. But Flav says this. He says, don't believe the hype. One of the things that happened in 2017 was there was a lot of hype about all of this stuff. But there is this thing called the hype cycle. And what happens in the hype cycle is BS is smeared liberally all over the place, and anything can happen and all possibilities are open. We overestimate the impact of technology. There is a reckoning, and basically we say, you know what, that was craptastic. You are totally wrong. And there's a pullback. But then the cycle begins again with people who are more pragmatic, who have learned from the overreaching. And I believe that in all of these things, the cycle is about to start again with more practical applications and goals. And, you know, in the end, that lights a spark for everybody. And these things, again, your city government, your Department of Transportation, you know, your neighborhood association is going to be affected by all of these things. Where you go shop, what size store there is. I'm waiting for the South Park apocalypse. That will be interesting to see. You think it's going to happen? 5 years from now, it could be gone. There are people like, no way. But there's an H&M in South Park, and I say to myself, is that a high-end store? Really? Things to think about. Everybody, that is my talk on hacking the city. Hope you enjoyed it.